Good afternoon.
Hello there.
Here we are for our Wednesday live stream. We're Laura and Dave Butler of Work Life Consulting. So thank you for joining either on the live stream or on the recording. We're thrilled you're here, regardless of your location and time that you're joining. So today's conversation is about this leader's journey. So a little precursor, Dave, to why we are doing this.
Well, it seems like the whole world is in need of leadership. We got some interesting statistics that show that 80-something% of leaders think that leadership development is a high priority, but only 13% of them say that they do it very well. No wonder we have such a dearth of leadership. So we're focusing on this. We have done lots of this over the years, and we've newly minted our Leader's Journey program to include several programs and one to take us from the mindset of leadership to the impact of leadership.
And we are, as I said, Dave and Laura Butler of Work Life Consulting. We provide organizational development support, not only for the organization, but for individuals and teams. And we also help with transition and all the change that's going on every day. And I think it's a perfect segue to talk about mindset to impact, because if we don't have the right mindset, and people are watching, your people are watching, and it's not only for yourself as a leader in an organization or as a contributor in an organization, it's your family, it's your community, it's outside of work. So there's a lot of discussion these days about the importance of mindfulness. And I think if we set the right stage for the mindset of mindfulness, we can be a whole lot happier, number one, but a whole lot healthier, number two, and model that for everybody else.
Yeah, it's time. Organizations are realizing as a result of the great reset, the great resignation, the great whatever you want to call it, that they've got to start paying attention to people's well-being and overall happiness and wellness. It's not just show up and work all day. You bring your whole self to work, but we wouldn't even necessarily go to work anymore. We're remote. How do we maintain our connections? How do we work together to be able to create a sense of camaraderie or esprit de corps, whatever you want to call it? It's all important, but how do we do it when the world is in such turmoil?
Well, I think it for leaders in particular, it's now more than ever is that place of moving from I'm the smartest in the room to I'm more emotionally smart. And that requires a creative approach and the ability to tap into resources.
Yeah, and there was an interesting discussion this morning on MSNBC about the importance of being able to connect and understand difference. The things that we've been preaching for so long about the fact that nobody gets taught how to deal with difference, that there's actually a new book out with a lot of statistics in it about how important it is that we start learning how to deal with difference.
Yeah, and it requires a different point of view. When we can espouse to accepting everybody, but there's always going to be what's in that for me with anything.
Yeah.
How do I adjust? So one of the things that we have helped leaders do is to tap into these, what you call it, Dave, is the 5 how-to attributes of leadership.
Yeah, because I think we got to get practical with it. There's an awful lot of leadership theory out there. You can read articles all day long, but in the end, you're still going to go back and be able to apply it. So the how-to, I think, is really important. And that's what we've evolved in the last year or so. We've done a couple of programs that break it into the 5 how-to attributes. The first being trust, which, of course, you can't do anything without trust. It's the foundation of everything.
Well, the definition is getting along with others and managing relationships. So it just so happens that the tool that we use, the motivational tool, the Berkman method, has scores in it. They're sort of the behavior scores of how you do what you do, applied directly to each of these 5. So for building trust, it's how do you relate to another colleague, family member, community member, one-on-one, along with how would you relate to the group?
The group, right? Everything's going to be others and relating to others, but that's either going to be one-on-one or with a group.
So the best thing to do with this is, how often do we see people jumping into the agenda? Let's get going. Let's get to the end, and let's finish up in 5 minutes. Well, step back, take a breath. It goes back to mindfulness. It goes back to having a sense of awareness, and ask for just how are you doing?
Yeah.
Maybe out of that will come an interesting story that opens up more trust and connection.
That's right. Sharing personal stories has been shown to be the number one way to build trust. And when we don't keep up with those stories, we just feel like we're disconnected.
So as we move to the next, there's how to build collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going back to what you were saying about difference.
Yeah.
And it's handling differences and setting expectations around what do we want to accomplish alongside those differences as we work together.
Yeah, and just how powerful it is to start getting other people's ideas and pulling them together. That's the foundation of creativity.
And the scores that go along with this one is one of them is how do we use assertiveness and how do we speak up? The other, which you might touch on a little bit, is image management. And all of these scores that we're referencing have narratives that go along with them that are specific to you. So it's remarkable how it all ties together.
Yeah, and I think image management is something that runs through all of this, because the way that we manage our image and how we think we show up, how we want to have other people think about us, what we believe, what our values are, all of these things are incorporated into the report of the image management. And it certainly is the foundation of collaboration. But it brings us right to the next one, which is called commitment.
Well, before we move on to that one, I think the image management score, what I really think is telling about that one is those of us who would show up in collaboration based on how others perceive us and think about us, as opposed to those of us who show up based on just getting the work done.
Mm-hmm.
So that affects how we collaborate.
Absolutely. What we think is important.
Which leads to how do we build commitment?
Right. And so one person's commitment is going to be different than another person, because a lot of my commitment might have more to do with people, because that's my background. Somebody else's commitment is going to be a lot more oriented towards the challenge of the project, or how big a deal it is to actually get the work done. And we all know people that are like that. I mean, they're more interested in getting the job done. It doesn't matter so much what the people feel. And then other people are more social and spend more time working together with other people in order to get a joint owned kind of feel about it.
Yeah, and it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just an awareness of how we handle it, how we perceive it, and how others might pick up on it. And what's helpful is to be able to read the room and know, is this where I should be today, and tweak it a bit. It doesn't mean we change who we are a full 360. It's just tapping into another point of view. So the scores that affect commitment are, how do we look at rewards, and how energized are we around the process of what's going on?
How emotionally connected are we?
Yeah. So all are completely important and relevant. And then this is one that I think is the biggest struggle for leaders. It's how do we build accountability, which handles coping with changing schedules, details, constantly. We're just juggling all that.
Well, I think the important point here with the accountability is, when we're not saying how do you hold people accountable, it's how do you build accountability so that people hold themselves accountable. How do you build accountability as just one of the foundations of how we do the work? Not me, chasing after you every 2 minutes, being a traffic cop saying, "Where are you? Why didn't you give me what I wanted?" I mean, that kind of pace setting is not something that's really going to help.
No, and it hinders accountability, But the scores that apply to accountability are how do we organize our information? Do people see us as organized or disorganized? And it doesn't mean if they see us as disorganized, there's something wrong with it. It's their perception. Those who seem to be disorganized might be more improvisational. They might not come with everything super prepared in the moment, but it unfolds as they're in the conversation. And there are others who come with a whole agenda. So again, it's tapping and reading the room and knowing, do I need more of this or do I need more of that?
Right. And the key to accountability is also metrics. What are we using to be accountable? Is it vague idea? Is it actual numbers and specifics?
And the other score that goes along with it is how do we adapt to the interruptions of change?
Mm-hmm.
We all know that's coming at us at warp speed. So how do we handle that so we don't fall off our game?
Yeah.
Stay connected. But we are Dave and Laura Butler. For those of you who are tuning in later of Work Life Consulting, we're talking about the 5 attributes, which are how-to attributes of leadership, in our opinion. And we're going to be diving into this a little bit further. But thank you for joining. And I'd love to hear in comments as we finish up here, what do you think is the strength for you, and what might be something that could be a challenge of these 5 attributes? Mm-hmm. And the final, which everybody wants to jump to right out of the gate, is how do we build results?
Then we got the goalpost, right?
Yeah. So we're done now. We don't have to look at the other 4.
Right.
Building trust. We'll get to that. Or collaboration, commitment, and accountability. Yeah. Let's get to results. Let's move on. And this is making decisions, managing priorities, and the scores that are aligned with this is how do we respond? Are we active or more reflective in our decision-making style? And how do we make decisions? Are we quick, maybe impulsive? Do we take too long and maybe overdo it in terms of thought?
That's right.
So there has to be a sweet spot.
Yeah. So this also relates, finally, in the results section is where we talk about the styles of leadership and the different ways that people go about being able to enforce the leadership that they like to see. And we have a whole program we've talked about in the past about the 6 styles of leadership and when to use what.
And we'll be refreshing that as well. But in terms of being successful with all of this, it requires being emotionally smart and acquiring emotional mastery.
Right.
So what you can do, the ticker on the bottom takes you to our website. There is up and running right now a quiz, Are You Emotionally Smart? And it gives you some insights into where you're at, where your gaps may be. Maybe you're spot on and everything's great, but doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way
right.
as the world spins around.
And we'll have a preferred style, the one that we feel more comfortable with. But if that's the only club in our bag, pretty soon we're trying to drive the golf game with only a putter. I mean, you need to have more than one style. So that's what we work on in our programs of building emotional mastery.
So thank you for joining us today, and we will be back next Wednesday, and we'll continue diving deeper into this topic, because leadership is not a one-time thing. So thanks for joining. See you next week.